Good evening and welcome to GEMA RIFFS, a new virtual series hosted by the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance, highlighting Georgetown alumni musicians. Thank you for taking time out of your day to connect virtually with fellow Hoyas for today's conversation with alumnus Greta Gaines. I'm Stephanie Seitz, the Senior Director of Alumni Alliance and Affinity Engagement here at Georgetown, and I'll be facilitating today's event. Before we get started, I'd like to share a few tips and reminders. This conversation is being recorded and the recording will be made available on our YouTube channel, and you will receive a recording link in the follow-up email. We will take questions at the end of today's discussion, so please feel free to share your questions using the questions section of the webinar control panel. If you're having any technical difficulties or other issues, please also submit those via the questions section of the control panel. Today's conversation is being led by two GEMA volunteers, Mitchell Pizer, a 1993 graduate of the MBA program, and Joseph Caruso, a 1987 graduate of the McDonough School of Business. Without any further ado, I'm pleased to turn things over to Joe to kick things off.
Thank you, Stephanie. Again, I'm thrilled to be hosting the second episode of our virtual series, GEMA RIFFS, along with Mitch, my co-host. Mitch is also co-director of GEMA DC, and by day an executive producer at Time Life. As for me, I'm a media and technology exec with a lifelong passion for songwriting and playing in bands, including my Georgetown band, the Pub Rats, which actually was around when Greta was there.
Yeah,
Pub Rats. One thing. By way of background, Mitch and I launched this series to highlight the ever-increasing amount of Georgetown grads that are working in the music industry. It's meant to be informational and inspirational for current students and alum who are interested in the career paths of musicians, songwriters, producers, managers, etc. Today, we have a special guest, Greta Gaines, a truly unique individual. She's a singer, a songwriter, an activist, world snowboarding champion, extreme sports competitor, television host, and most impressively, of course, a Georgetown grad. She has 7 albums to her credit, including her most recent 2021 release, Palestar. So I will turn it over to Mitch and Greta, and we'll get things rolling.
Thank you, Joe. And Greta, it's so great to have you. It's nice to be talking with you again. So we really appreciate it. And I thought, with that intro, why don't we start there? You have such a varied career and path. Talk about how that evolved and how it all happened.
there was never a plan. It was just, what is it, the Sarah McLachlan song, Stumbling Towards Ecstasy. I just followed the things that I was interested in. And I thought I was going on one path. And then I grew up in a very sporty and artistic family. My parents are from Alabama, but I was raised in New Hampshire, like a wolf cub. I was just, me and my brothers were really wild, and we spent a lot of time on the outside, and we were ski racers early on. So my father, who's a novelist, who also invented paintball and is a world-renowned fisherman, he just constantly had us doing all kinds of crazy things outside. So the sporting part of how I evolved into a snowboarder is one sort of tier of my development, but the artistic side was always there. My mother's a painter, my dad's a writer, but it took me a while, and it wasn't until I went all the way through Georgetown on the other side that I really figured out how I wanted to bring it all together in terms of being a musician. But I have always done sports and music. Decades before that was like a thing, and it made sense to people. So I've just followed my bliss, done the things I've been passionate about. I'll find something that I'm fascinated by, and then I just dive in, and I want to get as good at it as I can. And but I went to Georgetown, I think, to be a lawyer. And I got in there and looked around, because my parents were so artsy. I didn't think that there would be where I would find my path in the arts. But it was through the Georgetown experience, being an American Studies major, and taking all these great poetry classes. At the end of that experience, playing a couple gigs with Derryberry and Alasia. Right when I got out in '89, I moved to Jackson Hole and became a snowboarder during the day and a singer and a performer at night. So there's no rhyme or reason. It just all has always come from my desire to be free and to follow my passions. And when I get into something, I want to learn everything that I can about it. So I guess that's how it started.
It's such a fascinating story. So just getting into the music side of it. So was there music in your home, and did you listen, and what inspired you? Even though you took a different path toward music, what was the music that you were growing up with, and what was it in your home?
Well, so both of my brothers are very musical. My older brother is done musical theater and is an actor, but there was not a lot of entertainment in New Hampshire. There was no television until I was about 9 or 10. So we would start, my brother, I remember bringing home dulcimers, making different instruments. My parents are, like I said, both from Alabama. So they had a great record collection, and I grew up every night around dinner time, we would put on different albums, and it was Ray Charles and Dolly Parton and Willie Nelson and Emmylou Harris and all the Outlaws, and just great, Graham Parsons. I remember a friend of theirs gave me a Ricky Lee Jones album when I was 7, Janis Ian. They would just bring these records home, and then I would go to a record store when I got older. I really didn't realize it at the time, but I was being very deeply steeped in a songwriter tradition, because they were really, I think, gravitating towards great old country and folk music. And of course, there were a lot of profound songwriters in there. So that started to get into my brain, what a great song was as a child.
Yeah, that's quite a range of incredible musicians and artists. And I know you're in Nashville now, but so when you started writing, it sounded like you said that there was some formative years of writing at Georgetown. So what was that?
Yes. Well, I was in the American Studies program, but I was really taking a couple of English classes, and ultimately sort of a senior level poetry class with Roland Flint. And he's a wonderful poet. I think he's passed now, but he had a profound impact on me. And he set some of the practices, if you will, of being a writer. And I still do this today. I think it's so important for all writers to carry a journal and to write down the most mundane things that don't seem important to you. It's just like old guy eating a sandwich on 54th Street, and but like really to put to paper as a practice those things. And so we were studying poetry with him, but he was taking us to Sharon Olds, like he was taking us to hear poets read their poetry out loud, which was very different. That's one of the great things about being in DC, right? Is the resources, and the, if you're studying American history or studying poetry, you get to go to the source. So I started keeping a journal, started working on my poems, and not thinking at the time that it was going to lead to songwriting. But writing was such an important, my father's a professional writer, and writing was, really important to me. So I was studying it, I was working at it, and I was, but now looking back, I see that I was honing those observational skills through, and recently I've just repurchased a bunch of Roland Flint's poetry books and ordered them, been rereading the poems. Unfortunately, last year, my best friend from Georgetown, Maria Kirsten, who was in the program with me, she passed away from cancer, but it got me going through, it was so rough, and it got me going through the old papers, going through, I still have my notebooks from the times that I was at Georgetown, and I was rereading all of Roland Flint's stuff, just this deep, deep sense of nostalgia that, yes, I was setting practices, and there was a really high bar being set for us in terms of the writing. And now as a songwriter, I'm more of a poet than a musician, and that's where it comes from. It's always come from the literary side, and it usually comes from journals. Yeah.
Right. So the writing really took off at Georgetown, and I know some of the songwriters you mentioned, they might have started playing and writing at very young ages. But talk about how it was different for you.
Well, it was two things coming together later in life for me, kind of a late bloomer. But New Hampshire was. New Hampshire public school was wonderful for me and my brothers, because our music program was really great. We lived near Lake Sunapee, and Aerosmith would give their old instruments. Joey Kramer would donate his old drum kits. I had an incredible chorale teacher, and singing in chorale was competitive. And we would go to like Massachusetts, which is a big deal, and sing in these chorale different harmony things. So even though I didn't really know how to read music, and I didn't know how to play an instrument through high school and middle school, I was learning to sight read, and I was singing in these competitions. So I was always a singer. I always loved singing, but I didn't get the confidence to start writing my own songs until I got out of Georgetown, moved to Jackson Hole, played in a country cover band for a few years. And it wasn't until about 1995 that I had the confidence to be like, okay, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a songwriter. And that's when I moved to Nashville for the first time.
And you had to do some catching up with guitar, right? That took a little bit. Yeah.
It took a lot. I mean, my boyfriend at the time, he's passed away also just after during the pandemic, but he played pedal steel, and he with Bob Dylan and Steve Earle and the Dukes, different people, but he was such a fantastic musician. And he was like, you know, you really have to raise your game. You cannot be in this town, not be able to tune your guitar on time, not be able to, like, you know, sing your own harmonies, all this stuff. So when I got to Nashville, it was like a graduate school. I was surrounded by musicians. I would go to their shows, I would study, I would absorb it, and then I would practice because I did have a lot of catching up to do. So I picked up a guitar at 22, and I said, I want to be able to shred this thing by the time I'm 30. And it took about that long, you know, to get really good. But it's so fun to not take any of these things for granted. I'm not a virtuoso. I'm self-taught, so I really appreciate the originality of the things that I'm able to write. And of course, I really appreciate all these fabulous musicians that I'm surrounded with.
I was going to say, that's amazing. You've been surrounded by so many great people. So tell me about your creative process. How does it start from writing to music to recording?
Well, for me, it almost always starts with a title. It starts with an idea. I might be reading a book. I might be watching a movie. It is that, you know, grab the cocktail napkin at the bar, write down the idea as it hits you. But I'll start with an idea, like a song I'm writing on. It's called Fair Weather Friend right now. And I like the way that Fair Weather Friend sounds. And I have an idea of what I think it's about. But then I'll go to the guitar and I'll try to match musically, and you just start riffing. But I will, especially on my last album, the lyrics, when you read them stand alone, look like freestanding poems. So I will typically write and then edit, and the music takes me longer. And I don't collaborate very much. The times that I have been really wildly successful, but I don't let the lyrics go too far down the road before I start integrating the music. Like, you've got to have that hook, you've got to have that chorus, you've got to have that melody. When you wake up in the middle of the night and you're like, da, 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 and you hear it, that means that you're kind of onto something and in the middle of a song. And then for me, I need to not wait too long to get in there and try to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So when you're writing, it sounds like the writing evolves and you rewrite. Does that happen with the music as well, when you're starting to put it down and figure out how it's going to be arranged and produced and all of that?
Well, I work with two wonderful producers here in Nashville, Jim Riley and Eric Fritch, and they're just such fabulous musicians that when I know that I'm going to make a new album, I don't actually flesh them out that much. I mean, ideally, if I was touring a lot, you'd go out and play these songs a bunch of times. But for me, knowing how great they are, so the last record that we did, we tracked everything live. So I was on electric guitar and, you know, live bass and drums. And we built the tracks from that. But I like to take the songs in when they're pretty raw and organic and finish working things out sometimes with their input in the studio.
So before we go further down that road, you mentioned Sarah McLachlan, and it's so amazing to me that you were at Lilith Fair and performed there. So can you talk about that experience? What an incredible time that was.
It was mind-blowing for me because, keep in mind, I'd been off and on the road with Bob Dylan and that whole crew, and I'd seen, like, you know, large-scale musical production and what the vibe was like. But in '99, I kind of talked my way in to getting on a side stage for 3 or 4 shows. Sheryl Crow was out there, Chrissy Hines. So just that female culture, I had never personally experienced that. So you get to your dressing room and there's like a handwritten note with like a little token or something sweet, like waiting you from Sarah. And then in the pouring rain, you like, you know, you're like on this little side stage, you know, in the pouring rain, you look up and there's like Sarah and Sheryl Crow and like Women are like watching and supporting you, and it was just a love fest. And I think a lot of it came down from her spirit and the way she wanted to run things. But the lesson for me was you can operate out of this huge, open-hearted kind of kindness love fest and make a lot of money. I didn't know you could do it that way. It was amazing.
So that supportive group of women, are there any parallels between that and you're in the women's snowboarding, and so sports and music? Are there any parallels in how that all connects?
Yeah, there's a lot of parallels. I mean, if you're a woman trying to beat out her own path of this life, you are gonna come up against situations where there are power structures in place. And I think because of the boys' club that a lot of women have always had to operate at high levels in business, and in extreme sports, there weren't a lot of women. In rock and roll in the 90s, I didn't, the band members, it was sort of surrounded by men. And I think that there was a perception a little bit like there can only be one, sorry, we can't add you to the radio because we already have one. There's already Sheryl Crow. It's like, well, she's awesome, but I'm not her. And isn't there room for two? And also this queen bee mentality, that I had to fight my way to get here and I'm going to keep all the other women out. But I learned this from the beneficence and being, I also went out and opened for Alanis Morissette and Tori Amos, and I watched the way Alanis did it and the way her energy. And it was like, no, it's our duty to support each other. There's room at the table for everybody. I'm not going to be threatened by you because your star might be rising or because you're talented. I'm also talented and famous. And, just like this idea that, well, in the beginning of snowboarding for me, there literally were like 5 women snowboarding. So it was out of boredom and loneliness that I started a snowboarding camp with my best friend, Bear, and we started teaching lots of women to snowboard. But I think there's power in numbers, and this was in the 90s when maybe there was like a little bit of lull in feminism in a way. Like we've been through the whole thing in the 70s and we've experienced that, but it's years away from some of the breakthroughs that we've been experiencing now, let's say. But in rock and roll and in snowboarding, where I got a tremendous amount of support from the women around me, and I'm very grateful for that, because I definitely, was also seeing other things. I was seeing deep misogyny. I was on a label, where guys had been convicted of sexual harassment. Like it was like really a lot, but it was still in the 90s. It's just always hard to be a woman in these arenas. And hopefully it's getting easier, but
yes,
I was lucky.
Well, it is really amazing to think of who was there and that you were part of that. So it's amazing. Yeah. So when you started, so you played in some incredible venues. You toured with Bob Dylan. You went around with him. You did Lilith Fair. But talk about, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about forming, formative years with Honky Tonks and country bars, and what that live experience was like, and how that informed your later performances.
Well, playing honky tonks are so important for all musicians' development. Playing bars, playing venues, not getting shown up on, no offense to the show, or The Voice or American Idol or something before you've played any gigs and you're on this national arena. That's where you learn there, where you pay the dues. And the good nights and the bad nights is where you develop your voice. I think I can sing over anything at this point. Like if you could sing over a bad sound system in like Pocatello, Idaho at a wedding or something, you can, that's really sort of, and also it gives you this baseline of humility, of gratitude for when you get to other levels in the business and you're ready for that. But those can be tough crowds. So I honed myself. I think I became a strong performer through those experiences, because live music is so fabulous because it's about energy. But if they're not feeling you and you're not playing a two-step, or they've never heard this is a, God forbid, an original song, and not a song that they know from the jukebox, people aren't happy with you. You have to learn to manage that energy and give them what they want while still, staying true to yourself. So it's just such an important, any musician who's thinking about doing this, professionally should go on those, tick pull and celery festival tours and just get on all the stages that you possibly can. You're going to learn something every single night. And people, and that connection is how people fall in love with your music. When they see you live and they feel like, I've had people from a wedding 20 years ago come up to me, when you perform Beast of Burden out there, like, I don't, whatever it was, but like that's your opportunity to learn how to play off of and feed off of that human connection and why it's so important to have a live audience in the first place.
Do you have any especially memorable favorite or memorable experiences performing live? Stories?
Well, I had a really, for me, unbelievable experience. I think it was 2000 at Farm Aid, and I had been, I was there covering Farm Aid for the show that I had on Oxygen at the time, and it was called Free Ride. So I was there to look at renewable energy and to study what the farmers were doing and cover that, but also to interview Willie Nelson and Neil Young showed up, and he had a bus run on hemp biodiesel, and I was like, what is happening? It's so outrageous. And John Mellencamp asked me to sing Pink Houses with him on the performance. And I had a really cool rhinestone shirt, and my outfit was happening, but it was terrifying. And he changed the key, like backstage, just took the capo off and dropped it to E or something. But it's the kind of thing for a person who's already terrified to go up and sing a verse by yourself and sing harmony. So when I started singing, I was like, it sounded so low. I was like, can anybody hear me? I got it together, but a stage like that surrounded by those luminaries singing a classic song and it was, of course, broadcast, that stands out as a pretty awesome moment.
Willie, Neil Young, and Mellencamp and whatnot. And
you know how they get everybody on stage for one of those We Are the World type of things? I'll never forget this because, there's mics everywhere and there's people from the First Nations and there's 50 people on stage. And I turn around and David Crosby is standing right behind me. And I really want to do a good job. I'm like singing along and he's looking at me. He's like, nobody can hear. He's like, it doesn't matter. He just gives me this look like, don't even worry about it. Like there's 50 people up here. And, he's got that kind of twinkly look in his eyes. So yeah, that was incredible to be at Farm Aid.
So sounds like live music is really important to you. So how did you survive the pandemic without being able to be in front of audiences?
Well, it suited me fine because, I did some Zooms and I did some live performances, but since I've been a full-time mom to teenagers, live performances take place after 9 o'clock a lot of times. So like I'm just become that, early to bed, early to rise. So I haven't performed live actually in 4 years. So I miss it, but I don't quite know how I'm going to get out there again unless I do this new project of maybe putting out a best of album with some of my most fan favorite songs from the last 25 years. And it would be fun to go out and do some shows around a kind of a best of experience, I think.
Yeah, so talk about this best of experience. What's it like going back into your catalog and trying to figure out what's going to be part of this best of?
Well, my producer Jim asked me to pick top 12 and my list's at 27. So I need to cut it down. But it's really, really fun because the last record that I made, Palestar, was a pandemic record, and it's deep and it's a bit dark and it's very lush and it's a bit sad. So I am picking songs not only that I think are some of my best songs, but also songs that will translate the best live into the best kind of, rock and roll experience. Because when I play live, I really do have a lot of energy and I like for it to rock. So I'm going to pick more upbeat rocking songs and less ballads and hopefully trim it down and then put a couple new songs on there. So I think at this stage of my career, I don't know if I have any more albums in me, to be honest. I always will want to record and I'll always want to write, but the tradition that we came from, the album experience, writing 10, 12 songs, beginning, a middle, and an end, like that's how I grew up. That's what I loved. But now the culture is changing. So I'll make singles and write songs, but I think of the best of experience as putting a bow on the last 25 years of labor and maybe introducing some new fans to my body of work who've never heard anything.
Well, it's interesting to hear that you start with an idea when you write a song, and it sounds like from listening to Palestar that there were a lot of ideas flying through your head that were partially because of the pandemic and what that experience was.
Absolutely. I mean, it changed all of us. We're all different people now, having lived through the pandemic. For me, that album is about how to process loss in a way that there's still hope at the end of the day. So that really was it about. It was about transforming and expressing my own, whatever you want to call it, crisis, I guess. You know, my own, like, just being terrified of dying, of not being able to breathe. I'm an asthmatic, so that when it first came out, like, I didn't ever really. That terror for me goes deep, from being a pro snowboarder and being worried about being buried by an avalanche. You know, that idea. My brother pointed out something kind of smart. Well, when we're dying, none of us can breathe. And I'm like, that's true, but like, I don't want to like wake up one day and not be able to breathe. Like, it just seems so scary. So it's processing all that, but I wanted to write it in such a way, because this is my philosophy. This is what I believe. Like, no matter how dark or hard or scary or lonely things get, that it's our job as humans to dig in and to find the hope and to find the light and to find the meaning, even if there doesn't seem to be any. That's the purpose of art, is to help fill in some of that existential meaning, you know. So I was just personally happy to have a place to go to take some of it out.
You captured so well what it is that people really love and need music for. So is there music what music does it for you aside from your own?
You know, it's funny, when I'm writing a record, I don't listen to music with lyrics. I don't want to I don't want to get influenced by anything lyrically. So I'll listen to, like, George Winston, I'll listen to classical, I've been listening to a lot of instrumental bluegrass to like clean the house. But I mean, I really like I like what my kids are into. Like, I like listening to all the new rap stuff and figuring that out, and who's hot and why, and you know, whatever's on point, whatever's trendy, I try to listen to some of that. But you know, in my heart, I think I'm like a 70s hippie chick who just really likes great Americana, great folk, great country. I like storytellers. I like stories, and things that are authentic. And and my tastes are really just very varied. You know, I like Morgan Wallen songs. Like, I think there's some great country, you know, I think it's really authentic, and I can relate to that Tennessee point of view, like where he's coming from. So I like commercial stuff. And then I also, of course, I love indie. I listen to the Spectrum a lot. So I like, you know, try to hear what's going on and what people like and why they like it, while not letting that influence, you know, what I'm doing.
Yeah, well, and Nashville's become a lot more diverse, and people think of Nashville as the home of country music, but I don't know that it is exactly it's not just country.
No, before it was country, you know, with the Fisk Jubilee Singers and everything, it was gospel, and we have great rap and some really good rap artists come out of here, and hard rock. This is where musicians come to be musicians, you know. So there's going to be you know, cool bands that come out of Murfreesboro and like some other towns around here. So when you get this much talent packed into a town, I think that I think it's hard and challenging to get heard, though, and to cut through. It was easier in my day to get I'm dating myself, a cassette tape to a record label guy or whatever it is. There's just so much pressure on young artists now to do everything, right? You got to write it and produce it and record it and promote it and distribute it and all of that. And everybody, I mean, it's kind of a cliche. I have had multiple people come. I live in a 1930s old house. You know, a plumber buddy's like, can I play you my new songs? You know, it's like, I'm here to fix the telephone. It's like, well, I just wrote a new one this week. Like, everybody wants to live the dream, you know, get discovered.
Yeah, I mean, it is a very musical city, that's for sure. When you got there, I mean, it was different, but still, I mean, there are many ways, I'm sure it's still the same in terms of the depth of the musicianship. And so how did that feel to you? Was it intimidating, or was it welcoming, or was it both?
It was so intimidating. It was so intimidating, but I've always been good at spotting talent, and I surrounded myself with the best musicians at the time that I could find. My early bandmate was Daniel Tashin, who's gone on to be a really well-known producer and songwriter. He did the Grammy-winning Casey Musgraves album and stuff like that. And you know, Millard Powers, who plays the Counting Crows, like these guys were there, and I just was a sponge. And so I would surround myself with the best of the best. And but the only way to get over intimidation, I like to say that fear is a muscle. If you're afraid, you're probably where you're supposed to be. Not terrified, but if you're afraid and you're just like, oh, I don't know, like I'm out of my comfort zone. I remember going to like open mic nights at the Days Inn downtown where there was like 10 people in there. But some guy would get up and he would sing this like unbelievable song. And you're like, oh, I gotta follow that guy, you know, like, but that's part of paying your dues. It was totally different from playing in a country cover band. I wasn't intimidated to play, you know, Judd's songs and Trish Yearwood songs and stuff. But when you get up there and it's something that you wrote and you're surrounded by this level, I mean, to this day, a lot of people don't like to play Nashville. Because sometimes, you know, it's not that just like rocking along, enjoying it. You're looking out there and that guy's checking. I was like, well, I wonder why she's using the flat round strings, or like, I wonder what, you know, you can literally see musicians like tearing everything apart and sonically, but that's what raises your game, you know, is you have to be, to grow, no matter what you're interested in, you know, swimming in the tank with the best. That's how you get to be the best. So don't be intimidated. I mean, you can't be intimidated. You can know you're not as good. You can know that, oh, you know, that didn't go well, but it doesn't matter, because that's not really the point of why you're doing it anyway. You know, you're doing it because it's a calling, and because you love it, and because there's literally no better feeling in the universe than being super scared to get up on stage, going and doing your set, coming off backstage, sitting down with a beer and being like, oh, I did that. That just happened.
It's great to hear that advice of don't be intimidated. What other types of advice do you have for people who want to get into music, to be performing, writing, and all that, people who are just getting started?
I think it's really important for youngsters to be good collaborators, because you know what, the industry makes you feel like you've got to do it all, but we can't do it all. So find that indie photographer person, or, you know, that public relations person, or, you know, those people who love music, but they're not musical, and ally yourselves with them, and don't get taken in by the shysters and the people offering you this, that, and the other. If it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true. And stay on your grind and surround yourself, like I said, with people who you can trust, who are going to be great collaborators and who are going to help you with the platforms that happen these days to get people noticed. You know, there's people who are really incredible at digital online stuff. Learn how to trade. Like, I always had a side hustle, even though I was working, you know, 24/7 trying to make it as a musician. I would do television gigs, hosting gigs. I would do catering gigs. I would do the things on the side to support myself financially, and also to put me in a position where, you know, I could trade with somebody. If I can't afford it, like, we can collab in another way. You're really good at this, I'm really good at that. But I do think that musicians today, some people don't think they need a plan B. I just was always a person. I mean, I had already been to Georgetown when I started my career. That in itself was a plan B, right? But I've always felt like the best way for me to keep control of it and to keep it something that I love, and that no one else is going to come along and take the joy out of, or shelve my record, or all the things that, you know, I've been on 3 or 4 labels. I've experienced those relationships. But at the end of the day, like, my advice is, if you get lost in who you are musically by the opinions of others, it's very hard to get that back. So while you're collaborating and picking quality people to work with, you also have to protect and to grow what it is about you individually that's completely unique that no one else on the planet can do but you. Don't lose that kernel inside of the ambition of it, you know?
And you sounds like you like to find the best people to collaborate with, and you mentioned even photographers, so it's everybody. And I know even the visual is important to you. So, and you were talking about, you know, what your album covers will look like. So talk about that beyond the music, the visual aspect of music.
Well, the promotional photos for the last album were shot by Alan Messer, who's a legendary photographer and a friend for a long time, and he shot the Beatles and like the Stones, all the English bands, and everybody else in Nashville. I just worked out, you know, we wanted to work together, and we just worked out, you know, something that I could afford. It was during the pandemic. We had to do it with masks on, like all separated, but that's a relationship that I nurtured, you know, for years to be able to ask for a favor. But I've taken a lot of the visuals for the records myself. So early on, you know, I hired this person, whoever the record label tells you, but the cover of Palestar is a photo that I took out on the cliffs in Nova Scotia, looking out at Marguerite Island. And I worked on the with Jeff Hale, who is a tremendous designer, and he finished everything in terms of the little Palestar imagery, and he did this incredible thing. But he was following my vision and make it easy for people. If there's things that you can do, you know, if you're good at graphic stuff, if you're good at photography, if you're good at making videos, if you're good at TikTok, whatever your individual skills are, like keep working those skills, because all the assets that and all the direction that you can give to somebody else, I think really, really helps. So yeah, I think musicians today have to wear so many hats and be prepared for that. And if there's something you can't do yourself, so I'm not good at technology, right? I'm a little old for that. So, but I make sure that I mean, I've been working with my team for like over 10 years, my digital marketing people and all my people. So, the wonderful thing about being a musician right now is that so many of the most talented people in the music industry, you can hire them. A lot of people are just, they're not working for the big labels anymore. And you could call somebody up and be like, I know you're like this kind of rate, but hey, I've got this thing, I've got this, you know, I've got this vision, I've got this idea, I've got $500. What do you say? And you'd be surprised, you know, the kind of people that you can hire like on these indie budgets, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, it sounds like you're surrounded by some great people. So you mentioned that you came up with listening to albums, and now things obviously are, you talk about all the social media and all the different digital distribution. So what's important to you now? Is it Spotify? Is it beyond Spotify? And is it YouTube? What are the platforms that are important?
All the online streaming programs. It was incredibly important for my mom to be able to say, Alexa, play Empty Spaces by Greta Gaines. And just like out of the ether, you know, the music would come. So anything that's in your phone, anything, you know, I am a little behind the times on the visual stuff. I'd like to get up to speed on like TikTok and YouTube's and making more videos, but I don't do a lot of that. So I just really rely on all the streaming platforms. And for the next album, the best of album, I will hire radio promotion. So depending on what kind of record you've made or what your music's at, you know, you're like, I'm a visual artist and you need to be all over YouTube, all over TikTok, working it that way. If you're more old school or more sonic, or you really want to sell your LPs at the show, you know, sort of figure out like your niche a little bit. But yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more deeply about the whole radio promotion side and how it works? Like, what are they going to ask you? What genre you are? I mean, how do you find the right person? And
well, luckily I already know what genre I am, so I'm somewhere in Americana, adult alternative land, depending on the song. The last album was very Americana, country folk. So you hire the person who's the best in the field. You know, say you're a young indie band out of DC and you want to do colleges. That's a whole strategy on getting on for college radio, right? That's different than what I'm going for. Or say you're a Spectrum Sirius XM artist. You know, album of mine that did the best on radio, it made it to the #1 spot in Outlaw Country, was my album Whiskey Thoughts. And we went real targeted with that exact spot. We really wanted to get, we thought we had the right song for the right station, and we went for it. But you can't just throw it out there in a general sense. You have to already know, I got a pretty good shot of getting on a chart over in this genre or whatever it is. So radio's tricky, radio's hard. I think online is the way to go a lot of the times, because unless you're touring up there, like say you're on the radio in Martha's Vineyard, you know, and they're playing your song, like you should probably get up to Martha's Vineyard, you know, to support those plays. But unfortunately, whoever invented all of these platforms, who set, you know, who set the value at 0 at the beginning, you know, oh, my kids don't think you need to pay for music. They don't believe that. And I'm like, well, did you download that? Did you buy the album? It's like, no, mom. Like, and I don't know really honestly how they're getting everything for free, but that sucks for us, right? So I've had millions of downloads and stuff on the internet, and it usually doesn't translate into very much money. But I would say my advice for someone is know exactly what kind of music you are. Try to make a piece of work that's really cohesive without one song in this genre and one song in that genre. Even if it's an EP, try to make it something that a radio promotion person is going to be like, yeah, I know exactly where I'm going to, you know, try to get this played.
Right. So LPs now are, you know, obviously doing gangbusters. And so are you excited to have this retrospective album as an LP and to have people be able to pick it up?
Well, I'm ecstatic because I've never made an LP. I don't have any music. The last record, Palestar, I didn't even make in CD because they're just stacking up and people don't carry Discmen around anymore and they don't listen to CDs. So I'm really happy. To me, that means you're an album artist, you know.
I know that's your first LP. That's really, that's so exciting.
Yeah. And we've got a really cool record pressing plant here in Nashville, and it's not even that crazy expensive. And you might have to give some of your friends a record player with the record. Here you go. Here's the whole package. But yeah, I think that would just be like, that would be a full circle moment.
Right, right. Well, Greta, it's been great. I just want to thank you for being part of this. And I do want to ask you if there's anything that we missed, anything else you want to talk about, or just, you know, what's coming next, or.
Well, I just want to say to all the Georgetowners out there, what an incredibly exciting time it is to be at Georgetown. And I wish I could go back to school at Georgetown and be a performing arts minor and perform in that amazing, you know, amphitheater that you have, and just to soak it all up, because you're in a really special place at a really special time. And I think that the world needs art, needs music, needs connection more than they ever have, right? And so get that finance degree, but then go play in that band. Like, I just say do it all and really enjoy it. If the pandemic taught us anything, it's that the rug can be pulled out, things can change. And it's never steered me wrong when I followed my bliss and followed my heart. I've made really bad life decisions and business decisions when I thought I was being real cagey and real smart about something. But when I stayed in that heart space of what I truly love, it's always worked out for me. So I'm just excited to keep making music, keep making connections, and just feel really incredibly blessed that I've been able to make music for 25 years, because it never gets old. It always keeps you on your toes. And then there's the added benefit that if you're lucky and if you're good, people enjoy it and you get an opportunity to travel and meet people and do all of that. So that's it. Just stay healthy, stay well, follow your bliss, keep jamming. And it's just been a real pleasure to spend some time with you.
Such a pleasure, Greta. Thank you so much for your insights and your time. And we look forward to hearing your retrospective and getting it on LP.
All right. I'll send some up. Okay.
All right. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mitch. Joe
Yeah.
and Greta, for taking the time to have us with this conversation with our community today. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Please stay on the lookout for our next GEMA RIFFS event. Additionally, we will be sending a follow-up email, which includes information on additional upcoming programs hosted by the Alumni Association and the Georgetown Entertainment and Media Alliance. Thank you and have a wonderful night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.